It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. I thought we could just go through the scorecard that you all were courageous to offer last week and get some sense of your reaction. We did start with Maryland last time. Let's start with Maryland this time. Craig, you're up. Doesn't seem to be many surprises, but what's your analysis?
No, not many surprises. And I think probably one of the first races called was Wes Moore, governor of Maryland. And the fact that he had the kind of victory he had, clearly Republicans crossing over, and he was, he hosted the current president, former president, and others. I think, as I've said before, I think speaks well for him. He has to deliver as a governor, but he certainly has captured national attention, that's for sure.
And Al?
I agree with Craig. I mean, there's no surprise in Maryland. I think the Washington Post actually called Maryland for Wes Moore before the polls closed. So, yeah, because I saw this banner go across my iPad, and I was waiting for the polls to close. So, but no surprise in Maryland, sort of going back to normal, at least the statewide offices. The local offices, as we will talk about, I assume in a minute, are more interesting.
Yeah. We do have a closure on the first district, Craig. Obviously, Andy Harris has won re-election, but any thoughts on what the first district could do in the future?
No, I mean, this district is clearly carved out for a Republican, and I think a Republican's going to have to challenge Andy Harris, or Andy Harris is going to have to step away. He did actually believe in term limits when he was first elected, but that went away a long time ago. It was his race to win. He won it. I don't know what more you can say there. He is going to likely be in the majority party. Be interesting to see just how he sorts out where he stands with respect to the Freedom Caucus and other things, and whether he makes the presumed speaker, not yet settled, the presumed speaker, Kevin McCarthy's life more difficult or easier. That is going to be an interesting situation to watch once the Republicans go over the magic number of 218, because I think Kevin McCarthy, he may have the job he's dreamed for, but I have a feeling he's going to have a lot of restless nights trying to grapple with the caucus that he's been given.
Al?
I could not agree more. I mean, I think the most important thing about the first district is the first district may be part of a rebellion inside the Republican caucus now. The nutcases, they may actually lose one, because it looked like Lauren Boebert is at least going down to the very, very end. She was trailing as of last night, but there were more votes out than her deficit, so we don't know for sure. But one of the really crazies from the third district, Colorado. But there got to be, I would guess, in the Republican conference, 50 or 60 members, of whom Harris will be one, that don't want to play ball with McCarthy at all, want to sort of blow it up. I've been the director of a congressional caucus, and I know how hard it is and how tough that politics is inside. I mean, my first days on the job as staff director of the House Democratic Caucus in 1980 and 81, there was a one vote battle for the chairmanship of the Budget Committee. And even though it was secret ballot, paper ballot, both candidates were in my office going over the regional boxes to try to figure out who cast the votes that they didn't expect, even though they were unsigned. So I'm going to pity Kevin McCarthy, not much, but he's going to have a job.
I might add one thing on that. You have to say it was a good night for Andy Harris because he won. But in a way, on a national level, it was a very difficult night for the MAGA Republican colleagues that he has out there who are running, those who are not incumbents. And I think maybe you want to turn to this later, but I think that's kind of where the story is. Republicans have some real choices to make going forward. And at least to my way of thinking, leaving behind some of these MAGA Republicans is the more obvious and more prudent course to take. And that leaves Andy Harris in a strange position where he is going to be in the majority, but he may see Republicans moving at a leadership level, at least, away from him.
I want to move on to Pennsylvania, and this was one of the cases where you all split. Al, you were thinking Dr. Oz would prevail. That didn't seem to be the case. In fact, I was kind of shocked that the election was called so quickly. But Al, give me your thoughts on what happened up there.
Well, I think Pennsylvania, in a sense, was a microcosm of what happened in the country. I mean, look, I thought, I was wrong in a couple of these Senate races where I thought the Republicans were gaining momentum. And as we said all year, that this was going to be a battle between whether voters cared more about Trump and democracy and abortion, which is what the Democrats wanted the race fought on, or whether it was going to be more on inflation and crime. In Pennsylvania, it was more on abortion. Abortion was the #1 issue, even more than inflation. And interestingly enough, even though Dr. Oz ran all sorts of campaigns attacking Fetterman as being soft on crime, that's, according to the exit polls, the segment of the electorate that voted because of crime voted slightly for Fetterman, which was interesting. But the larger question or picture, and this reflects the national vote as well. Pennsylvania had more Republicans voting than Democrats. By a little bit, and that was the way it was nationally. But the reason Fetterman won, and the reason that the Democrats relatively held their own in House races, is because they cleaned up on independents. In the case of Fetterman, a quarter of the electorate identified as independents, and Fetterman won them by 20 points. Among moderate voters, which were 41% of the electorate, more conservatives than liberals, so that would have helped Oz, Fetterman won the moderate voters by 30 points. And that goes to the point Craig made about crazy candidates. I mean, what happened, what I look at it from a Democrat is the Democrats dodged a bullet, but they didn't stop the assault. I mean, you still look at the overall patterns with working class voters, and Hispanic vote was down a little bit for Democrats, particularly among working class Hispanics all over. But the salvation was that voters didn't want crazy candidates. And by and large, you know, that 60% of the people who don't go along with election denial said, we're not going to sustain this election denial stuff for another 2 years. And that helped Fetterman. It may wind up saving Cortez Masto and Mark Kelly as well.
You know, Craig, particularly related to Fetterman, you couldn't ask for a better candidate to run against in a way. You had a fellow who was still clearly recovering from a major stroke. His opponent had received the famous Trump endorsement. What does that say to you as a Republican?
Well, listen, I think I concur with what Al said. And I think ultimately voters were less concerned about a Democrat who'd had a stroke than they were about a Republican who was Trump-backed and blessed all the way. And I have to think really that I don't know how much the issues played to this, the policy issues or policy differences. I really think those independent voters who are uncomfortable with Biden, who actually are concerned about the economy and crime, took a look at their choices and said, no way, and in many cases, and thus handed the victory and possibly the United States Senate to the Democrats, and a number of Republicans, I think, probably did the same, and that's why, you know, I think MAGA/Trump had a very bad night. It's hard to make a case when you look at a race like Pennsylvania. It's hard to make a case and say that the MAGA element of the Republican Party really is a natural leader for the future.
Yeah, I want to move on to Georgia. Of course, that state is going to go into a runoff, but it does show you what a third party can do. Libertarians took in about 2%, which threw this into a runoff. But once again, we'll be seeing eyes on Georgia. Craig, let's stay with you on that. What's your...
Well, we'll be seeing eyes on Georgia, and we'll be seeing checks flow. This is going to be, you know, I started getting fundraising appeals from both sides. I think before the night was over, they knew this was a likely possibility. They're clearly planning on it. You know, let's hope we have a secure, sound election. There were some good reassurances, I thought, coming out early on that score. I still think this one probably tilts to the Democratic side. Herschel Walker's issues are large and serious, and you know, when people reflect on what happened with the election, again, it's hard for me to see how his support grows. Although, frankly, it's hard to imagine that he was even a candidate. But I think I would say that this one probably goes to the Democrats in December.
Al?
I think this one will be decided in Arizona and New Mexico. If Cortez Masto hangs on in Arizona and Nevada. If Cortez Masto hangs on in Nevada, as John Ralston, the great Nevada guru, says she probably will, looking at where the vote is still out. And if Mark Kelly can hang on in Arizona, then the Democrats will have control of the Senate, whether or not they win in Georgia. And I think in that case, Republicans won't make nearly as big an effort, and Warnock will probably sweep. I mean, it is a third party. The third party did play a role, but 2% is really not very much. I mean, the thing with Georgia is it's evenly divided. It's been evenly divided all through the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, Biden won by 11,000 votes. Both Senate seats went to runoff last time. It's evenly divided. And I think Georgia was interesting because the Biden drag really hurt Warnock. Biden's approval rating was 39% going in Georgia, which was below the 45% nationally in the exit polls. And that was a real drag on Reverend Warnock. In a lot of cases, including Pennsylvania and some others we'll get to, the independent voters in particular, who usually vote against the incumbent when his approval ratings are like that, wound up breaking very strongly for the Democrats. So the drag, people, you know, it may be 3/4 of people said they didn't want either Biden or Trump to run again. And maybe they're just trying, you know, the Republicans lost because of Trump. Maybe they want to get rid of him. And the Democrats said, well, Biden's not really very relevant anymore because he probably won't run. And so let's, you know, vote to save democracy, or at least not make things worse.
You know, Al's already brought up Nevada and Arizona. Craig, it's still undecided. It is interesting. I have to point out that the election deniers don't seem to have the kind of demonstrative attention grabbing that they've had in the past. What's your take there?
Well, taking them together, I think, is the way to look at it. Mark Kelly seems to me has enough of a lead that while it may tighten, that I would predict he will hold Arizona. Nevada, I really think is too close to call. I think Laxalt, big name, made a strong showing, but it feels like that one might be slipping away. And then Al rightfully points out that happens, and suddenly Democrats do have control of the Senate again. I think the election deniers, maybe for two reasons, are less significant. One, I think overall the electorate's just simply tired of that. If that was an issue that had any resonance whatsoever, it was a year or 2 years ago. People, it's kind of like, get over it. And January 6th is still in the minds of many of us. And the fact that violence was the result of that kind of rhetoric is something I think gives a lot of people pause. And then secondly, I think you have to hand it to those who are running elections. The security of the election seems to be very sound across the country. You just don't have places where challenges seem to be appropriate. And that speaks volumes in terms, because trust me, there would be challenges if there was any opening, even in New Mexico. I mean, in Arizona, where the gubernatorial candidate there challenged, sort of, was kind of ridiculed. I mean, as saying something that was nonsensical, Kari Lake. So I think I do think we owe a lot of thanks to these election officials and volunteers who've made the system work really well this time.
I want to pull together
Let
with
me just say one other thing, because I got both. I hope I got both Arizona and Nevada wrong. I mean, I picked Laxalt, and I thought Blake Masters would sneak up on Mark Kelly. But I really think, and in part because I thought in both of those places, inflation would be just a killer with all the retired people in Arizona, and inflation and the economy have just killed the tourist industry, and it's coming back in Nevada. But gas prices are over $4 or $5 a gallon in Nevada. But I think we, at least I did, really underestimated the power of Trump. I want to say one thing about that, because this is really significant. It's not something that people look at. Nate Cohn, who does the Upshot New York Times, did this analysis, and he showed that most off-year elections are really referendums on the incoming president, and the incoming president gets so much more attention than anybody else in an off year. But this time, in at least the first 6 months of this year, Trump dwarfed everybody else in Google searches. I mean, in every other presidential year, the loser in the last election got 5% less of those Google searches. This time, he doubled or tripled anybody else. And so, while it may not been so apparent to us as we're watching the ebb and flow and all the idiosyncrasies and every movement in a campaign, for ordinary people, I think Trump was a much bigger factor than we probably could estimate.
Well, we do have two states left, and that's Wisconsin and North Carolina. You both agree that it would be a Republican victory in both of those states. The only thing I could say that in Wisconsin, there was an effort on the Democratic Party to bring their top guns there to try to save the day. They certainly did that in Pennsylvania, and maybe there's an argument that worked. It didn't work in Wisconsin. What's your takeaway, Craig?
I think it was destined to be close, but also you have an incumbent running in Wisconsin and hard to unseat. Um, that's about as much as I could read into it. I don't think Ron Johnson plays well into the story that's coming out of this campaign with respect to more reasonable Republicans doing better. I just think the fact that he has the seat and held on was probably the reason why.
Al?
I think in North Carolina and Wisconsin were two places. First of all, the electorate was slightly Republican, but they're the two of the I think the only two states among the ones we looked at where independents actually broke for the Republicans. Mandela Barnes, the Democratic nominee, was viewed as a pretty liberal guy, pretty left-wing guy, and Johnson certainly in his ads didn't let people forget that. And Johnson actually wound up winning the independents, not by much, but it was a very close race. The one race we haven't met, same thing in North Carolina, even though that race I never thought was going to get particularly close. The one race we haven't mentioned, which we all got right, was Ohio, where we all picked J.D. Vance. And the thing that struck me when I looked at Ohio's numbers was that all of these states had a little bit of a Republican lean, and the electorate nationally was 36-33 Republican with 31% independents. In Ohio, there were, I think it was 41 Republican and 30 Democratic. So even though Ryan did win independents by not much, but a little bit, he really had no chance going in.
Greg, you were supporting, or you were suggesting that J.D. Vance would win in Ohio. It's going to be interesting how he proves out over the next 6 years as a MAGA Republican. Do you think he might change some of his tone as he gets into the chamber, so to speak?
Yeah, I suspect that he is not 100% locked in. Somebody made the point that he on election night thanked 30 or more people from the podium and never once mentioned Donald Trump. That could not have been accidental. I think he probably is at a young age going into the Senate. He's still feeling his way. What will be interesting, I think, in the next several weeks is whether he's going to be a thorn in Mitch McConnell's side, no matter whether McConnell ends up as the minority leader or the majority leader. But the fact is, McConnell didn't help him much. So this is a guy who could well be a bit of a maverick. He seems to have moved past Trump, and I don't know that he's moved towards McConnell. So I suspect we'll have to wait and see. I think he probably comes, since this is the first time he's been elected to an office, he probably comes with, shall we say, a great deal of flexibility with regard to where he lands on some of these issues.
Yeah. Hey, we're about ready to run out of time, and we still don't know the status of the House control. It certainly won't be the 225 that Al was projecting, but we still kind of will assume that it will be a Republican House. I want to move quickly on to the Trump future. It's apparent that he is debating whether or not to now announce on November 14th his attempt to be for re-election. And the Wall Street Journal and others have pointed out that he's furious at his wife for having support Dr. Oz. But he's in a more compromised position than he thought he was going to be. Al, what's your take?
I never thought he could win the presidency again, and I'm absolutely convinced he can't even get close now. I think he's been damaged very much. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Mitch McConnell. He cost Mitch McConnell the Senate. And if you look to 2024, it's a year that if the Republicans just can put up candidates who are not absolutely certifiable, they're going to win the Senate back. And Mitch McConnell isn't going to want to have Trump interfering. So I'm going to just suggest something that's probably pretty wild, but it's not going to get to the 225, even though it'll get pretty close. It'll be 220, 221 or 2. So they won 10 seats instead of, I guess 25 would have been 13. But Kevin McCarthy is going to probably have to disband the January 6th committee. I wonder if Schumer and McConnell couldn't, after these last 2 years and after what happened to McConnell in this election, couldn't create a special committee in the Senate to pick up its work.
Oh, that's interesting. Al, Craig, what's your take on that one?
Well, that would be remarkable. I do think that McConnell will find and knows he has Republicans who would just as soon find a way to make sure Trump does not come out of this in any stronger position. Clearly he was weakened, and I certainly believe that, and I think that we're not going to get the kind of leaders stepping up until we can push Trump aside. Ron DeSantis in Florida, the governor of Florida, deserves a lot of credit for the size of his win, the bipartisan nature of that in some cases. I'm not ready to say. I don't know that he will be the one to carry the banner for the Republican Party going forward, but he's a threat to Trump because he's an alternative to Trump, and he's somebody that people are paying attention to. I'd also say at this point too that we should and have to acknowledge that even with issues with respect to favorability, even with issues that are concerning people about the economy and some of President Biden's policies, President Biden has managed to come out of this in a historic way with fewer losses in the Congress than anybody would have earlier expected. I think it says a lot about the Republicans, but it says a lot about Biden, and he should be acknowledged for having worked through this in the way he did. But I also think it's a further reason why Donald Trump needs to stay at Mar-a-Lago and do whatever it is he does there.
We have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much. We will see you next week.